For 3 weeks, Daniel felt something strange moving quietly around his marriage. It's like a shadow that never stepped fully into the light. It began on a gray Tuesday evening in Seattle when he came home early from work and found Emily standing, still in the kitchen, her tea untouched, her eyes thoughtful. She said her mother had called again. The words sounded simple, but there was weight behind them. Margaret had always been protective, but lately her questions had sharpened. She asked Emily if Daniel worked late often. She asked if he ever hid his phone. She asked if love really stayed the same after 2 years. Emily tried to laugh it off, yet something in her voice told Daniel that the questions were starting to sink in. A few days later, Margaret invited Daniel for coffee downtown. He was surprised but hopeful. Maybe this was her way of building trust. The cafe was warm and busy, the smell of roasted beans filling the air. Margaret greeted him with a polite smile. She asked about his work at the architecture firm, about his plans for the future, about whether he and Emily wanted children soon. Daniel answered openly. He had nothing to hide. Then her tone shifted. She leaned forward and asked, almost casually, what he would do if a woman ever showed interest in him. Daniel laughed, thinking it was an odd but harmless question. Shh. He said he would tell Emily because that was how their marriage worked. We're honest about everything. Margaret nodded slowly, studying him in a way that made him slightly uneasy, though he brushed the feeling aside. 2 days later, Daniel noticed a woman at his gym. She seemed friendly, confident, maybe a few years younger than him. She introduced herself as Rachel after accidentally dropping her water bottle near his treadmill. He picked it up and handed it back with a polite smile. She started small. Talk about workouts and asked how long he had been coming there. Daniel answered briefly, keeping his tone kind but reserved. When she asked if he lived nearby, he mentioned he lived with his wife just a few blocks away. He made sure to say the word wife clearly. Rachel paused for a second, then continued, chatting as if nothing had changed. That evening, Daniel told Emily about the encounter while they washed dishes together. He didn't think it was important, but he believed in transparency. Emily listened quietly. She asked what the woman looked like. Daniel shrugged and said she seemed nice, but overly friendly. Emily forced a small smile and changed the subject. Later that night, Daniel noticed her staring at her phone longer than usual. He wondered if Margaret had called again. The next week moved faster. Rachel appeared at the gym again, this time greeting Daniel like an old friend. She asked if he wanted to grab coffee after their workout since they both finished around the same time. Daniel hesitated only long enough to choose the right words. He told her he preferred heading home to his wife after work. He said it gently but firmly. Rachel laughed and said he was loyal. He answered that loyalty should be normal, not impressive. The conversation ended there, but Daniel walked away with a strange feeling. It was too coincidental that she kept showing up. Meanwhile, Margaret's questions became more direct. She asked Emily if Daniel ever seemed distracted. She wondered aloud whether men truly stayed satisfied in marriage. Emily defended him each time, but doubt is quiet and patient. It does not shout. It whispers. By the middle of the second week, Emily began noticing small things she had never cared about before. Daniel checking his phone. Daniel staying late at work. Daniel smiling at a text from a colleague. None of it meant anything, yet her mind began connecting pieces that were not connected. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel ran into Rachel again, this time at a grocery store near his home. She waved enthusiastically and walked over. She commented that fate must be bringing them together. Daniel felt the situation growing uncomfortable. He told her clearly that he was happily married and that he hoped she understood he was not interested in anything beyond casual greetings. Rachel's expression softened, almost guilty. She apologized and said she admired his honesty. Daniel thought that would be the end of it. That same evening, Margaret invited both Daniel and Emily to dinner. The house felt tense from the moment they arrived. Margaret had set the table perfectly, as if preparing for an important conversation. Halfway through the meal, she placed her fork down and sighed. She said she had heard Daniel was spending time with another woman. The words landed like ice water. Emily's face turned pale. Daniel felt confusion first, then frustration. Calmly explained about Rachel, about the gym, about the grocery store. He reminded Emily that he had told her each time. Margaret listened carefully, her eyes sharp. She mentioned specific details that surprised Daniel. How did she know about the grocery store? How did she know the woman's name? Emily's voice trembled as she asked her mother how she knew so much. Margaret avoided the question at first. She said she only wanted to protect her daughter. Daniel realized in that moment that something bigger was happening. The meetings with Rachel were not random. They were arranged. A slow anger built inside him, not because he felt accused, but because trust had been quietly tested without his knowledge. Emily looked between her husband and her mother, torn between loyalty and fear. She loved Daniel deeply, but her mother's voice had been in her ear for weeks. Margaret insisted she had reasons to be cautious. She spoke about past betrayals, about men who seemed perfect until they weren't. Daniel listened respectfully, though his heart ached. He understood that Margaret's fear came from old wounds, but he wished she had trusted her daughter enough not to interfere. The dinner ended without resolution. On the drive home, silence filled the car. Streetlights passed over their faces in soft flashes. Finally, Emily spoke. She asked Daniel if he had ever felt tempted by the attention. Daniel answered honestly. He admitted that being admired feels flattering for anyone, but it did not change his commitment. He told her that love is not about never noticing someone, else it is about choosing the same person every day. His voice was steady. He did not defend himself aggressively. He simply spoke the truth. Emily watched him carefully, searching for cracks. She found none. Instead, she saw the same man who held her hand when she was anxious, who stayed up late helping her prepare for job interviews, who made pancakes every Sunday morning. The doubt that had been growing began to lose strength. Meanwhile, Margaret waited for the result of her test. She believed she had done the right thing. In her mind, she had created a situation that would reveal Daniel's true character. If he failed, her daughter would be saved early from heartbreak. If he passed, she would finally feel peace. But she had not expected the emotional cost of her plan. At the end of the third week, Emily confronted her mother directly. She asked whether Rachel had been sent to approach Daniel. Margaret hesitated, then admitted the truth. She had asked a friend's daughter to observe Daniel, to talk to him, to see how far he would go. She never intended harm. She only wanted proof. When Daniel heard this, he felt both hurt and strangely calm. The mystery was solved. Okay. The shadow that had been circling their marriage finally had a name. He realized that throughout the 3 weeks, he had acted exactly as he always would. There had been no performance, no effort to appear faithful. He had simply been himself. Emily felt a wave of emotion anger at her mother for interfering, guilt for doubting her husband, relief that the truth was simple. She understood now that trust cannot grow under secret experiments. It grows through open conversation and shared vulnerability. Part 1 of their story did not end with dramatic shouting or broken plates. It ended with realization. Margaret's test had not exposed Daniel's weakness. Instead, it had revealed the strength of his quiet commitment. But the real question remained unanswered. Could their marriage fully recover from being placed under suspicion, even if it had survived? That answer would come next. The truth came out on a quiet Sunday afternoon, and once it did, everything moved quickly. Emily stood in her mother's living room with her arms folded, her voice calm but firm. Daniel stood beside her, not angry, not shouting, just steady. Margaret sat in her favorite chair near the window. It's the same place where she used to tell Emily stories about strong women and hard lessons. But this time, she had no story ready. She had only the truth. Yes, Margaret finally said. I asked Rachel to see what kind of man Daniel really is. The words hung in the air. No one spoke for a few seconds. Outside, a car passed slowly. Down the street, sighed something shifted forever. Emily felt hurt more than anything else. Not hurt for herself, but for her marriage. You didn't trust me, she said softly. You didn't trust my choice. Margaret tried to defend. Herself, she said she had lived through betrayal. She said she knew how charming men could be. She said she only wanted proof that Daniel would not break her daughter's heart. Her voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from memory. Daniel stepped forward calmly. If you were worried, you could have talked to me, he said. You didn't need to test me. Margaret looked at him carefully, searching his face again, maybe hoping to see guilt or weakness. She saw neither. She saw a man who was hurt but controlled, disappointed but respectful. That unsettled her more than anger would have done. Emily felt tears rise in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. She had spent 3 weeks living under a quiet cloud. She had questioned small moments. She had replayed conversations in her mind. She had watched her husband's expressions more closely than ever before. And now she realized that the doubt had never belonged to her. It had been handed to her. Mom, she said gently, love doesn't grow stronger when it's tested. Like this, it grows stronger when it's trusted. Margaret's shoulders lowered slightly. For the first time, she looked older, not in years, but in emotion. I was afraid, she admitted. I saw how happy you were, and I was scared it could disappear. Daniel felt something soften inside him. Fear. That was what this had always been about. Not control, not manipulation. Fear of history repeating itself. I'm not your past, Daniel said quietly, and Emily is not you. The words were not harsh. They were simple and true. Later that evening, Daniel and Emily drove home in silence again, but this time it was different. The silence was not heavy. It was thoughtful. When they reached their townhouse, Emily sat on the couch and looked at him directly. I need to ask you something, she said. He nodded. During those 3 weeks, did you ever feel curious? Even a little? Daniel did not rush his answer. He chose honesty over comfort. I noticed the attention, he said. Anyone would. But noticing is not the same as wanting. I never wanted anyone else. I only wanted you. Emily studied his face the way her mother had. She wasn't searching for weakness. She was searching for reassurance, and she found it. She moved closer to him. I'm sorry I let doubt grow, she whispered. He shook his head. You were placed in a difficult position. I don't blame you. That night they talked longer than they had in months. Not about Rachel, not about Margaret, but about themselves. About how easy it is for outside voices to enter a marriage if doors are not closed firmly. About how trust must be protected from both temptation and suspicion. They realized something important. The real danger had not been another woman. It had been silence. The next morning, Margaret called. Her voice sounded different, softer. She asked if she could come over. Emily agreed. When Margaret arrived, she did not carry her usual confidence. She carried a small box of pastries and an apology she had clearly practiced. They sat at the kitchen table, sunlight filling the room. Daniel poured coffee for everyone. I was wrong, Margaret said directly. No excuses this time. I let my old pain guide my actions. I thought I was being wise. I was actually being unfair. Emily listened carefully. Daniel remained quiet, giving space for the moment to unfold. Margaret turned to Daniel. You handled this with dignity. I expected you to slip. You didn't. Daniel gave a small smile. There was nothing to slip from. Margaret nodded slowly. I see that now. The apology did not fix everything instantly, but it opened a door to new understanding, a door to boundaries. Emily gently explained that their marriage needed space. That trust could not survive if it was constantly examined under a microscope. Margaret agreed. It was not easy for her, but she agreed. Days passed and life returned to its normal rhythm. Daniel went to work. Emily focused on her projects. Laughed again without tension. The gym felt normal. Rachel never appeared again. The stage had been cleared. One evening, Daniel and Emily walked along the waterfront, the sky painted in soft shades of pink and orange. Emily slipped her hand into his. "I learned something," she said. "What?" He asked. "That love is not proven in dramatic moments. It's proven in quiet choices." Daniel smiled. "Like choosing to come home every day. Like choosing to talk instead of assume," she added. They stopped near the water, watching the boats move slowly. Emily realized she felt stronger than before. Not because her husband had been tested, but because their communication had deepened. The storm had revealed weak points, but it had also revealed strength. Margaret, at home alone that same evening, sat by her window thinking about her actions. She remembered her own young marriage, the promises, the betrayal that had followed. She had carried that wound for years without fully healing it. In trying to protect her daughter, she had almost damaged the very thing she wanted safe. She understood now that protection without trust becomes control. A week later, Margaret invited them both for dinner again. This time there was no tension in the air. No hidden motives, just food, conversation, and small laughter. At one point, Margaret looked at Daniel and said, "Thank you for loving my daughter the way you do." It was simple, but it meant everything. Daniel realized something important too. He had been tested without knowing it, yet his behavior had never changed. It gave him confidence, not pride. Confidence that his values were not fragile. Confidence that temptation only has power when secrecy exists. Emily rested her head on his shoulder later that night at home. "I don't want outside fears shaping our marriage," she said. "They won't," he replied. "Not if we keep choosing each other." 3 weeks of secret testing had almost planted permanent doubt. Instead, they became a lesson. A reminder that trust is not automatic. It is built, protected, and sometimes repaired. Margaret learned that love cannot be secured by traps. Emily learned that doubt grows fastest in silence. Daniel learned that calm honesty speaks louder than defense. Life did not turn into a fairy tale. They still had disagreements. They still faced stress from work and family. But something had changed. There was a new layer of understanding between them. Quiet strength. Months later, when Emily told Daniel she was pregnant, the first person she called after him was her mother. Margaret cried not only from joy, but from relief. She knew now that her daughter had chosen wisely. And more importantly, she knew she had to trust that choice. In the end, the real story was not about a test. It was about fear meeting truth. It was about suspicion meeting integrity. It was about a marriage standing still while doubt tried to push it over, and when doubt finally stepped back, love was still standing, stronger.